All right, shalom, shalom. This is your brother Yashimai from the GMS Atlantic Camp. All praises, all glory, all honor to Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushai, Ba'ashem Kakadash, and double honors to the elders and the apostles, the great millstone, whom will and teach well, who taught us his truth. Today's video is going to be going into the tribe of Zebulon, which is enunciated Zebulon in the Hebrew, okay? Before we get into it, those of the tribe of Zebulon or Zebulon are those that are from the Guatemalans to the Panamanians, all right? So though that tribe would include those that would be from El Salvador, Honduras, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, and Panama, okay? Now, let's go ahead and get straight into the scriptures here. Let's get Genesis 49 and verse 1. All right, it says, And Jacob called unto his sons and said, Gather yourselves together, that I may tell you that which shall befall you in the last days. All right, so now we know that Genesis 49 is going into a prophecy because, you know, as you can read there, that the very last two words says in the last days, because, you know, according to Deuteronomy 28, we would be scattered, right, if we went off. And did we not go off? The answer is yes. You know, the Most High scattered us. You know, that's why, we go into, how the Israelites are the Gentiles, because we were scattered and we took on the customs of other heathens. All right. So this is a prophecy. Okay. And this tribe here shows you that it's a prophecy that would happen at the end times. Yeah, even based on its geographical location. So this is Genesis 49, verse 13, says, Zebulon shall dwell at the haven of the sea, and he shall be for a haven of ships, and his border shall be unto Zidon. Now, we'll get the understanding on that, but first, let's get the word Zebulon, and as we can see here in the Hebrew, that would be Zebulon, all right? Zebulon, and the definition for Zebulon is habitation or dwelling, all right? That's what it's going into. Now, as I said earlier, how we know that this is a prophetic speaking is because when it says that Zebulon shall dwell at the haven of the sea, when you go into the biblical map, showing the land masses that the tribes had, look at where Zebulon is. Zebulon is a landlocked mass here. So how could it be a haven for ships if there was no sea around there? Well, that's because, again, we were scattered, and Zebulon being part of the northern kingdom, we know that in 2 Ezra 13, around the 40th verse, it talks about how the 10 tribes that were taken into the Assyrian captivity would go into another land, right, where no man dwelt. And that other land, started from, was when they went from the Horn of Africa, and then they came to Hispaniola, came to South America, and then from South America, they continued up, and then into Mexico, and then into the United States, and even Canada, okay? So that's how the Northern Kingdom, specifically Zebulon here, ended up where they were here, all right? In Guatemala to Panama. So we're going to get the understanding on this verse here. So it says, Zebulon shall dwell at the haven of the sea. So again, going into a prophetic speaking. Now, when you go into the word haven, in the Hebrew, it's hawap. And that word hawap means a seashore, a coast, or a shore. Okay, so now we understand that Zebulon would be at the sea coast of the sea, that he would be at the coast of the sea, and that he shall be a haven of ships. Okay, so that goes into the Panama Canal. This is the seashore. The Panama Canal is what connects the Caribbean Sea to the Atlantic Sea, okay? So like from the Caribbean to the South Pacific, all right? Correction on that. And we will get some articles on that. Matter of fact, let's see here. Panama Canal. Okay, Panama Canal. So it says, where you at? Yeah. It says the Panama Canal is an artificial 51-mile waterway in Panama that connects the Caribbean Sea to the Pacific Ocean. It cuts across the narrowest point of the Isthmus of Panama and is a conduit for maritime trade between the Atlantic and Pacific Ocean. Locks at each stage lifted up. Let's go down here. It says the Panama Canal shortcut greatly reduces the time for ships. All right, which, as we just read, Zebulon would be a haven for ships. All right, it says for ships to travel between the Atlantic and the Pacific Oceans, enabling them to avoid the lengthy, hazardous route around the southernmost tip of South America via the Drake Passages. Its construction was one of the largest and most difficult engineering projects ever undertaken since its inauguration on the 15th of August, 1914. It says the canal has succeeded in shortening maritime communication in time and distance, invigorating maritime and economic transportation by providing a short and relatively inexpensive transit route between the two oceans, decisively influencing global trade patterns, boosting economic growth in developed and developing countries, as well as providing the basic impetus for economic expansion in many remote regions of the world. So this was the Panama Canal was an undertaking taken by the French, which the French ended up going bankrupt during the time of its building, and then America continued the financing of it, and then after a couple of years, they gave the control of it to the Panamanians. All right. So this is how it works out. It goes, the ships, right? Because we're going into the haven of ships. All these ships get picked up here through this man-made lake here, Catton Lake, and then they get dropped down, or vice versa. But this is a route that saves a lot of time, because imagine if you're going from Peru, Ecuador, Chile, all right? If you had to go from here to Massachusetts, you would have to go all the way from the bottom and around. Well, that's what makes them the haven for ships, because now all these ships from all these coasts right here are not able to just cut and go straight across. So that's how we know that through the Spirit, that Zebulon would be those from the Guatemanians to the Panamanians. Okay, let's continue on and get some more edification on that. Because we brought up here, said that it cuts across the narrowest point of the Isthmus of Panama. That's actually their national hymn. The national hymn, and I'm not going to play it for trademark purposes, but it's the national hymn of Panama is Himno Istmeño, or the Isthmus hymn. All right, and when you go into that word isthmus, what about that? Isthmus. Isthmus is a narrow strip of land with sea on either side, forming a link between two larger areas of land. So through the Spirit, we see characteristics that that shows us who Zebulon would be. All right, it says an isthmus is a land bridge, a narrow strip of land that stretches across a body of water to connect two or larger land masses. All right, and that's exactly what the Panama Canal is. All right, here's that isthmus here. All right, so let's continue on and get some more of the edification here. It says, Zebulon shall dwell on the haven of the sea, shall be for the haven of ship, and his border shall be unto Zidon. Okay, so it's actually pretty short for Zebulon on Genesis here. Let's go to Deuteronomy 33, and we'll go to verse 18. Now, this is the blessing of Zebulon, all right? So we'll get some more edification here. It says, and of Zebulon, he said, rejoice, Zebulon, in thy going without, and Issachar in thy tents. Okay, so why does it mention Zebulon and Issachar? Well, for two reasons. One is because when we pull up the biblical map here of the 12 tribes, not only did Zebulon and Issachar dwell together in the ancient times, but as the Spirit would have it, because, Issachar is also part of the northern kingdom, as the Spirit would have it, they also dwell amongst each other when they came over here and they went off. Because the Aztecs, the so-called Aztecs are from the tribe of Issachar, and the so-called Panamanians and Guatemalans are would have been called the Mayans. So as we just read in Deuteronomy 33 and 18, it says, Zebulon and Issachar rejoice in thy tents. Is going into them being together even when they crossed over here. All right, here we can see a map of that. All right, we see the purple is the Aztec Empire, and then we see the green is the Mayan Empire. And when it says that they shall rejoice together. That's again because even when they came into these areas, they traded amongst each other. If you do a quick Google search, did the Aztecs and the Mayans interact with each other? It says yes, the Aztecs and Mayans did interact with each other, primarily through trade and some military conflict. While the Mayan civilization was older and had already experienced its peak, the Aztecs expanded their influence into Mayan territories. Archaeological evidence and historical accounts confirm these interactions. So they did dwell amongst each other, and they rejoiced together. How? By trading, all right? And then furthermore, it says, in thy tents, in thy dwellings, all right? So let's continue on here. Let's get Deuteronomy 33 and verse 19. It says, they shall call the people unto the mountain. There they shall offer sacrifice of righteousness, for they shall suck of the abundance of the seas and of the treasures hid in the sand. Now, let's go ahead and get, because, where it says that they shall call the people unto the mountain, that's going into those pyramids that the Mayans and the Aztecs were known for. But it's also going, I think it was somewhere right here, 17, wherefore, here's Perseus. So he sent them, came upon, what was that? Maccabees 13. Right here. First Maccabees 13 and 28. So it says, so Simon also built a monument upon the sepulchre of his father and his brethren, and raised it aloft to the site with hewn stone behind and before. Here's the point, verse 28. Moreover, he set up 7 pyramids, one against another, for his father and his mother and his 4 brethren. Now, this goes to show you that the 12 tribes were also building pyramids, right? And that's exactly what that's going into. It says, they shall call people unto the mountain. There they shall sacrifice. There they shall offer sacrifices of righteousness. And, what's this going into? This is of a future prophecy again, because what are the Aztecs and the Mayans known for? Well, they are known for their human sacrifices. Let's go ahead and get into that. I think I got it right here. Human sacrifice in Aztec culture. First, let's get the Google AI overview. Aztec in mind. If it ends up loading, and if it doesn't end up loading, we'll just go back into the Wikipedia. So, not sure what's going on with the phone here. We'll just go straight into it. It says, human sacrifice was a common practice in many parts of Mesoamerica. The rite was not new to the Aztecs when they arrived in the valley, nor was it something unique. Other Mesoamerican cultures, such as the Purapechas and Toltecs and the Maya, performed sacrifices as well from archaeological evidences. However, the extent of the human sacrifice is unknown. And I mean, these people, the Northern Kingdom went completely off, man. Which is the same thing that they were doing before they came into the Americas, man. All right, which we'll get the precept on that too. But let's just continue here. It says in 1519, explorers such as Hernan Cortez conquered the Aztec capital and made observations and wrote about reports of the practice of human sacrifices. It says Cortez made frequent mention of human sacrifices in his memoir. There are a number of hand accounts. It says since the late 1970s, Great Pyramids going into those high mountains, right? As of 2020, archaeologists have found 603 human skulls. Role of sacrifice in Aztec. It says right here. Sacrifice was a common theme in the Aztec culture. It says Aztec priesthood and demanded under the threat of death that they desist. It says it right. I don't mean to jump around. I'm just trying to prove the point here. It says human sacrifice was in the sense the highest level of an entire panoply of offerings through which the Aztecs sought to repay their debt to the gods. It says both Sahagún and Toribio de Benavente observed that the Aztecs gladly parted with everything, even the stage, for human sacrifices. It says the massive temple pyramids was an offering mound crammed with the land's finest art, treasures, and victims. They were then buried underneath for the deities. It says self-sacrifice was also quite common. People would offer maguey thorns tainted with their blood. So they were just completely going off. So that's what the Mayans and the Aztecs were known for. So when it says, there they shall offer sacrifices of righteousness, that's going into today's time. That's going into us coming into this truth, right? Starting with the tents of Judah being saved first. That's the northern kingdom coming back into the understanding of who they are, but here specifically talking about Zebulon and Issachar. All right, so it says, for they shall succor the abundance of the seas and of the treasures hid in the sand. All right, and one thing about the Aztecs and the Mayans, when you look at their way of living, they had floating garden cities that they would be able to cultivate, right? That's how they would have these massive crops, which are written about. We'll go ahead and get that. Let's see, Aztec farming, Aztec water farming, Aztec water farming, also known as chinampas, involved creating artificial islands and shallow lake beds for agriculture. All right, so that's what that's going into. When it says right here, it says, for they shall suck of the abundance of the seas and of the treasures hid in the sand. It's also, of course, it's going into the Panama Canal, but Israel, has always had a knack for getting through things, man. Because sadly, we've been consistently oppressed. Now, I want to get some precepts here. We're going to end it off with Hosea 8:11, just to continue to build on that point here, where it says that they shall call the people unto the mountain, because as we just read, Zebulon and Issachar were completely going off, sacrificing to their, sun gods, man. But this is how we know that these are the people, because that's exactly what they were doing before they came over to the Americas. This is Hosea 8:11. And we're going to go down to 14. It says, because Ephraim has made many altars to sin, altars shall be unto him to sin. Now, Ephraim, that's when Ephraim is mentioned, it's talking about the northern kingdom. Ephraim, the so-called Puerto Ricans, are the head tribe. And just like when Judah is mentioned, Judah is the head tribe, so it's talking about the southern kingdom, or it could be intermixed, like Israel and Judah, it's talking about the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom, for example. But here is going into those many altars to sin, going into those mounds, those pyramids. It says, I have written to him the great things of my law, but they were counted as a strange thing, right? Because again, even before they came into the land, they were still building these mounds, and ultimately That's what they continued to do, even though they said within themselves, they said that within themselves that they were going to leave the Assyrian captivity to try to practice their laws. But what did they do? They ended up falling back into it. This is 2 Ezra 13 and 42. It says that they might there keep their statutes, which they never kept in their own land. But lo and behold, the northern kingdom went completely off. Verse 13, it says, they sacrifice flesh for the sacrifices of mine offerings and eat it. And we just went into that, the Aztec and the Mayan human sacrifices. It says, but the Most High, Yahweh Hashem Yahushua, accepts them not. Now will he remember their iniquity and visit their sins, they shall return to Egypt. And that's exactly what ended up happening. Even though the northern kingdom went into the Americans, they got overtaken by Hernan Cortez and got taken into captivity, right? They got slaughtered, and then they got taken back to Egypt. What do I mean by Egypt? Well, according to Revelations 11, verse 8, America is modern-day Egypt, all right? It says, for Israel has forgotten his maker. Now, again, as I mentioned earlier, Israel, is going into the northern kingdom. For Israel has forgotten his maker and buildeth temples. And Judah, that's the southern kingdom, has multiplied fenced cities, but I will send a fire upon the cities, and it shall devour the places thereof. And going into the building of those temples, man. It's going into the Aztec pyramids, man, where we saw that they would do their sacrifices, and they would throw their bodies down, man. All right, and the Most High sent fire. He sent judgment. Through the Edomites. The so-called Spaniards, man. So that's pretty much it for Zebulon, which means dwelling. Hopefully this lesson has been edifying, and until the next one, I'm gonna say shalom.